my biggest piece of advice, and it's one that the accessibility community has said often and said very loudly, is to start with accessibility in mind.
Mhm.
If you build your game from the very beginning with the idea that it's going to be as accessible as you can, it's A, a lot less expensive, and B, a lot simpler to build up from that as a platform.
Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Zero to Play podcast. I'm your host, Carl Leduc, and today I'm joined by Humphrey Hanley. Humphrey is a professional motivational streamer and speaker advocating for better digital accessibility in our games and experiences while sharing his personal stories and struggles to his community. Today, we'll be talking about his perspective on the industry as a whole, ways developers can make more accessible games starting today, and how he has become so good at Apex Legends. So sit back, relax, and enjoy episode 13 of season 4 of the Zero to Play podcast. All right. Welcome, Humphrey, to the show. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, thank you. Dude, that intro is a vibe. And also, can you write all of my intros from now on? Anytime I need one, can I just be like, hey, Carl, you know that thing you wrote? Can you do another one? Like,
Well, I've gotten
that
it to
was,
like
that
a
was
to a
gushy. I love it.
system. If you want me to write something exactly the same, because all the intros are exactly the same, I've made it into a factory process. But yeah, it definitely has made me a better speaker, I think, having to write these for every guest. But thank you, I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so this is going to be a really special episode for me personally, for the community listening. I think advocating for accessibility is a really, really important topic, and I don't think there are many people talking about it regularly. So I think there's a lot of value that you can share and a lot of insights that you can give to people out there, whether they're game developers, whether they have their own disabilities, and just kind of breaking down the walls. That's kind of where I want to go with the show. So thank you so much for providing your time, and and that's kind of the direction I want to go. I think to start off, just to kind of set the scene I'd love to know if you could explain a bit about your disability and the kind of struggles that you face on a daily basis. Because I think for me, I've absorbed your content, and I feel like I have an understanding, but I'd love to just hear you kind of reiterate that to the people listening.
Absolutely not a problem at all. So, disability-wise, I have a genetic condition called epidermolysis bullosa. And I go by the moniker No Hands because EB has, as you can sort of see there, out of focus, as you can see by the camera, EB has caused scarring and syndactyly, essentially, is what they call it, whereby the webbing on my hands has absorbed all my fingers into fists and mittens, essentially. Which means, other than this little bit of my thumb here, I've lost all ability to use any fingers and do anything in that regard. And it also means my skin is just really fragile and pretty useless, really. Any friction, any bumps, knocks, even just daily stuff like sometimes, I don't know, picking up a heavy cup or opening a car door, or trying to turn a tap on, or actually just before this, I hadn't been in my studio for a while, so I was trying to adjust my tripod that has my webcam on it that you can see here, and I almost gave myself a blister trying to rotate the lever that loosens the camera that means it can swivel. Like, just silly things like that are every day, but your choice is to give it a go and risk getting injured, or just sit in your room and doing nothing all day. So, and unfortunately for me, well, fortunately, I guess, because it means I've lived for as long as I have, but living for as long as you do with my condition, things like skin cancer has become a regular occurrence. And that's why we had to, unfortunately, delay the initial recording of this because I was having surgery on my hand here last week to cut skin cancers out of it. And now it kind of feels like I'm wearing a boxing glove on my hand. So I've been struggling a little to play some video games at the moment, which is a shame.
Yeah, that's a real shame. I hope the recovery from that operation is going well. And I mean, just those few examples that you've experienced today, like that's incredible. Just how on a daily basis the kind of problems that you encounter. And like we're going to be talking about like games and accessibility in games, but I think it's it's fair to say that accessibility is like a physical thing as well. It's something that you have to deal with in every area of your life. I just love that you're so open about it as well, because it's so I love being able to learn and understand more, and it's awesome to see someone that's just so open about it, open about the experiences and talking about it in just like a natural way. And I just want to let you know that I appreciate that.
Thank you, mate. No,
yeah.
well, I mean, for me, it's been games accessibility and tech accessibility has become a relatively new thing to me. I started on this content creation journey in 2017, and that led on to learning that games accessibility was more than just me hacking my way into things to figure out how to actually make them work for me, that there was like this whole career of people out there advocating and lobbying and fighting for the devs and the game world to become more inclusive and more accessible to people. And it just kind of became this natural progression that, hey, I wanna be a part of this space and help make a difference, because my entire life has been about fighting for space. And as you say, like that used to always be about physical space. Like from my I remember even just going around the neighborhood, and in Wellington there were ridiculous things like the council would put in a mobility car park without a curb crossing that you could get a wheelchair up next to it. So you'd like get out of your wheelchair and you'd have to wheel up the road, kind of thing, just because accessibility is always an afterthought.
Well, I saw your Xbox unboxing, which I thought was an awesome video, and I also saw that last month you did like a takeover on the Xbox Twitter. What was that like? What was that experience?
Yeah, their Twitch channel, that was amazing. They gave me the keys to their Twitch kingdom, and that was so much fun. It was me playing Halo badly last time round because I'd been so out of practice, and when I originally booked it in, I was like, I checked the dates and I didn't really pay attention to when the new Halo comes out. So I said, it'll be fun to play Halo. And I'm like, yeah, it'll be all new, and it'll be the new version that's bound to be a bit more accessible. But then that's not out properly yet. And it wasn't a week where that was like under a beta or whatever where people could play it. And so I had to play the old Master Chief Collection, which is still super fun, but nowhere near as accessible. So I couldn't do things like change controls and stuff like that. Like I had to go into the system level and literally at the system level change what the buttons did on my controller rather than being able to do it on the fly in the game.
Right.
But like that's just it's kind of actually just an example of how far things have come, right? That old school Halo gaming from like Master Chief Collection up didn't even think about that sort of stuff. But now in a lot of ways, the new things are considering that as like a base level of, is this accessible or not?
Yeah, no, and that's what I love is once there's like a problem that is solved, and then that the industry kind of adopting that, and then that just being the way to do things. It's very fascinating though to hear that Microsoft, and Halo as a franchise are still figuring out better ways of creating more accessible experiences and in their games. And it's I
love Microsoft as a team, like as a company as well. They have an amazing ethos around inclusivity and of making sure that the people who are solving the problem for are part of the solution and part of that problem solving as well. Like they even have a huge amount of inclusivity and accessibility involved in like even their HR process and things like that. And right down to, you mentioned the unboxing, like right down to the fact that guys that work in the packaging team all figured out how in the heck they could make a box more accessible. Like an actual cardboard box is one of my biggest nightmares when it comes to companies saying, oh, we'll send you something. I'm like, cool. Let me prepare the knives that I'll need to like hack in through packaging tape and all sorts of things. And like, or let me just ask someone else to come and open this for me. Not with the Series X boxing. That was literally like one piece of tape to lift off, and then it just went, boop. Nice. I am open. Here is your Xbox. Enjoy.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love seeing that too. And I guess one question I have is when it comes to accessibility, is it's obviously like an ever evolving problem as there's like new technology, like new platforms, like whether it's VR or whatever it might be in the future, that then solutions are being discussed for now. Is it an evolving thing where you personally find yourself like how big of a bucket is accessibility, like in terms of what disabilities are considered, like what would you put in that box, and where do you draw the line?
What would I like to put in that box is everything, obviously. Everything should go in the box, whether it's me not having any fingers or somebody else with a visual impairment that finds certain textures and stuff in a video game too close together so they can't see where the path forward is. Or whether it's cognitive things that mean that people trying to solve or learn a rote process to get through a video game can have an obstacle that they can overcome as well. Oh gosh, there's a fantastic talk, and it's only a few minutes long, by Ian Hamilton. I don't know if you've heard of him yet, but he's sort of the godfather of accessibility.
Nice.
In so many circles, in so many ways, and he's been out there doing a whole lot for accessibility over the years. But he has this great conversation about difficulty options, essentially, in a game, and how there aren't actually really difficulty options don't exist. As a game dev, you must know this, that difficulty options are just a collection of toggles and options that adjust a whole lot of variables in a game. And all of those things can actually be considered accessibility things that for some people, sometimes it's needing to dial this up or toggle or down or whatever. But if the enemies are just as difficult, that's fine. Like, if you unpackaged all those things, and I'm messing up his talk completely here, but
I'll link it below.
Kind of is the gist of it, that it's about the fact that when we're talking accessibility, what we're essentially talking is unpacking options that mean that we can, depending on our disability, adjust things accordingly to what suits us or what makes a game still challenging and still engaging, but not impossible.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. I love that. I'm going to go do some deep dives into Ian Hamilton's stuff and check it out. And I'll link below some content there if people are interested.
It's fantastic. And it's all about that whole thing that it isn't that accessibility means removing challenge. Accessibility just means removing the barrier that stops you overcoming a challenge.
Giving them the option.
Yeah, a challenge should still be a challenge, but it should be a challenge that you can actually overcome. Like, there's no point having a challenge that you can't overcome because of a disability.
Yeah, I absolutely love seeing you get lost in the kind of state of flow when you're playing Apex Legends, and I'd love to know like what your setup is like, because it looks like your mouse is it looks like it's been like hacked in a way to make it work for you. Can you explain a bit about your setup and how you yeah, how you play like a first person shooter. And
Absolutely. In fact,
able
I can
to,
go you one better. I can actually, because I'm coming through OBS here,
yeah.
I can actually, if you give me a
Oh,
second.
that's so cool. You can show your camera view. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Anyone
I'll just,
listening on like Spotify, you have to watch the video feed to see
yeah,
Humphrey's setup.
you can see on the camera here. There's my actual gaming mouse. This is my mouse for using my other computer that does all the streaming stuff. So it has less buttons and less switches.
Yeah.
And this here goes on the mouse.
Wow.
In my hand. Oh no, I forgot. It's a fat hand at the moment, but I need to get it in there anyway. My hand
Wow.
goes on there like that.
So was this custom built by you, or was this some sort of collaboration?
Yeah, so there we go. So then my hand clips in like that, and I can move the mouse around freely,
Yeah.
not worrying about like crashing into things and running out of desk space. And then if I need to type, it's magnetized. So I can just lift my
Nice.
arm out, tap heel or whatever I need to tap on the keyboard, and then just click back in and then just click back in and away we go.
I love that. That's amazing.
Back
I
to
love.
the clicking and the pew-pewing. And then I
So
also have, there you go, this view. You can see here, this little box here
yeah.
is the Xbox adaptive controller.
Oh, right. I've seen this. Okay. How does that
And
work?
so you can see the wires coming off the back of it there.
Mhm.
Those are just 3.5 mil plugs, and they go to a bunch of different toggles and switches and levers,
Mhm.
including a couple of pedals under my desk. And those can essentially be modified to be any button on an Xbox controller that I want.
Wow.
So when I'm playing Apex, I have one of those buttons doing the what is it? On Apex, one button does sprint. So one
Yeah.
of my foot pedals will create the sprint function. And the other one is your melee strike in Apex.
Yeah.
And then if I'm playing other games on the Xbox controller, I'll set up because obviously for me with a controller, it's the bumper triggers are the hard things to use.
Mhm.
The buttons and the joysticks on top, not too bad. I can make my way around them,
Mhm.
but the bumpers are too far when you don't have any fingers. So I set up the two pedals under my desk as left, right trigger, and then I'll have two extra buttons on my desk for the actual like R1, R2 to just tap. And then try and reconfigure it so that those aren't the buttons I need to use very often.
Mhm.
So like the buttons on my desk will be more about something unusual, like some call my horse if it's Red Dead or something like that,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, like something I'm not using all the time.
Wow.
And so my mouse there is actually made by a Christchurch company. It's a SwiftPoint Z,
No way.
but the shell around it is totally, this is another model
Is that
of
3D
the
printed?
shell, is totally 3D printed.
Nice.
So you can sort of see it sits on the mouse like that.
Yeah.
And this bit up here is where my wrist goes. Oh, which way's in focus?
Yeah.
And it's, yeah, the magnet goes up in there to hold the wrist thing down.
Would you say that 3D printing has really kind of made accessibility a lot easier for these kind of custom solutions? Are you happy for where the like future of 3D printing is going?
Oh, I think 3D printing has so much potential for this sort of thing. Unfortunately, I don't know how to 3D print, and I don't have that skill set or hardware set in my repertoire yet. So I had the idea for how this could look, and originally to make the first version of this, teamed up with a guy I knew who was really into 3D printing and
Nice.
engineering and stuff like that, and he kind of came up with the blueprint for what it looks like. And actually, that red version I just showed you and the purple one that's on my mouse at the moment, prints by Dylan, by Rudism, if you know
Oh,
him.
nice. Okay.
Who's been absolutely fantastic at helping me modify some stuff that broke and fix some new ideas to create like a version 2.0,
Yeah.
2.3. I don't know what version I'm up to now, but the fact that it is even possible because of 3D printing is pretty fantastic, I think.
Yeah. Wow.
It's definitely a field I'd like to get more into. I think I've run out of room in this house to add a 3D printer with my whole studio taking over a whole
Yeah.
room.
Oh, that's awesome. Do you feel like there's any area that like, I love that you've kind of made it work for your situation, but do you feel like there's anything that you're waiting for, that you're lacking, that you're waiting for kind of technology or like companies to kind of catch up on, that you think, you're waiting for to happen next?
I don't know if I'm specifically waiting for a thing, but I'm definitely waiting, and I'm definitely hopefully excited for whatever's coming next is my
Mhm.
thing. Like I love it when someone brings out something and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's what I need. That would
Mhm.
be so useful." I mean, I'm only at the very early understandings of the technology, but even things like the home um Internet of Things stuff,
Mhm.
that goes on. Like at the moment, the studio, all the lights, technically I can control them doing the command that I dare not say, but
Yeah.
we'll say the Alexa version, the Alexa change the lights,
Yeah. Yeah.
but for me it's the Google one.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so the more things that I can use that sort of technology with as well, the more safe and useful life can be, like
Yeah.
um keen to have a new TV soon that might have that sort of functionality as well, so I don't even need to try and balance and hit the remote. I can just ask it to change to Netflix or whatever, that sort of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, that's true. I wonder if you can eventually play like a first person shooter using only your voice, if that would be something possible.
What would be fascinating is just blending it as an option,
Yeah.
like, and I can kind of imagine it, like imagine uh a mech game, like a mech warrior game, where you actually use your voice as one of the commands to activate cannons or something. Like,
Mm,
target the thing on the right, full
mm,
force, something around the cannons, fire, like that kind of stuff could
yeah.
totally blend into a game and
Yeah.
make it more accessible.
Well, can you imagine? And the thought just came to mind. You have like a mech, but like, someone is controlling the mech, and then you're kind of the brains of the mech, and you're giving the instruction, and you're kind of working together to,
So you can totally do that right now in a game because of Microsoft developing for the Xbox Copilot. I don't
oh,
know if
nice.
that's something you've
No, I haven't. Copilot, that's
heard of
awesome.
or seen yet, but Copilot by Xbox is essentially where I can have one controller, you can hold another controller, but they'll function as one.
Huh.
So you can do the steering, the moving the head around, and I can function on as many buttons as I can manage to do the rest.
No
So
way. I
like
love that.
um I don't know, say it's a racing game and I want to do the accelerating and the braking, but I need
Mm.
you to do the rest. And like together we can team up and play through a game.
No way. I absolutely love that. I can just imagine like a father with his kid like playing a game together,
Mm.
and being able to just connect on that level. That's absolutely incredible. I'm definitely going to look into Copilot as well. That's
And even
awesome.
just friends being able to help other friends enjoy the experience of being involved in a game. It's so cool.
Yeah.
And for me, I use it to mean I use the Xbox adaptive controller as a controller
Hmm.
and a standard controller, and just mix the functions as much or as little as I need to. So like as I said, like the sticks and the top buttons I can use, but the triggers I don't. So I use the other controller for that.
Hmm.
But it's piggybacking on that same technology to turn two controllers into one.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah,
So
it's
what?
fascinating. Yeah. And like there's so many things like that as they become apparent will make life more accessible in other ways as well. I mean, like as you say, it's interesting seeing my desk and seeing all this technology on my desk. But meanwhile, behind the screen here, like the way I've made my other setup accessible is like my DSLR camera has cable ties around the lens to help me change the focus and stuff
Right.
like that. And I use one of those Gorilla Pod things
Yeah.
to actually attach the camera to my arm when I'm filming stuff.
Wow.
And like my lights are super budget. They're just construction lights with a softbox over the top. And that's one of those areas that obviously I know better things, more accessible things exist, but that's where budget comes into this. Like often,
Yeah.
unfortunately, accessible solutions are expensive. They're
Mm.
not always cable ties and a hot fix like that. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. I love it. I feel like you must become you almost have to be a good problem solver. But I feel like problem solving is such like, I love my job that I'm in production because I'm just problem solving on a daily basis. And I feel like you must have such a great creative mind for like figuring out solutions to things.
I try to. I feel blessed with growing up in New Zealand for one. I think that whole sort of, I mean, it's the classic, right? The number eight wire philosophy that New Zealand kind of got this notion that we're built on people coming up with creative solutions for things with the bare minimum of whatever we could get our hands on in the moment.
Hmm.
So like life has been full of that sort of thing for me. Literally, like the cable tie solution to making things accessible is one of my favorite go-tos
Yeah.
for all sorts of stuff that I might need to hold or use or adjust.
Yeah.
And then it's just a case of like I used to work in an office that had big heavy smoke doors like
Yeah.
in the hallways and stuff that you had to like hit the lever and then like haul the doors open.
Wow.
So I actually in the end on my floor especially got them to put get a cable strap on the door to make it something I could just loop my arm through and
Oh,
pull the
nice.
whole door with my arm, but I think on a certain degree you've got to be creative, but on another hand you've also got to be willing and ready to say, hey, this is a problem. I have
Mhm.
a solution, or I need you to come up with a solution because at the moment, this doesn't work for me. And I think I'm uniquely lucky, not uniquely, but very lucky in the sense that I'm one of those people that's happy to stand up and say, hey, we need a solution.
Mm. Yeah.
And I think that's why I do half of what I do because I recognize that other people aren't necessarily going to be in that position where standing up and saying, hey, we need a solution is something they're comfortable doing.
Yeah.
And so they end up stuck behind an inaccessible door
Mm.
and can't get through it unless someone that's come before them has helped forge a solution and make that standard rather than an exception.
Wow, that's really powerful, and you're absolutely right. Not everyone is confident enough or ready to kind of go through that process. So yeah, definitely another big like well done to for just standing up and being the person that's bringing those solutions to the table or bringing the problems to the table and figuring out a solution. So I want to try and make this podcast be something that can be valuable to game developers that are in the middle of developing games right now. So, and this is a hard one because, as we've already discussed, even some of the biggest companies in the world are still having challenges and figuring things out. But is there anything, and talking about game development as a whole is hard because there's so many different platforms and genres and things like that. But is there any piece of advice that you'd like to give to game developers? You can maybe focus on a certain type of game if you want, if that's easier, of like accessible solutions that they can put into their game that would just make your life a lot easier and a lot more fun when playing these games.
So I think my biggest piece of advice, and it's one that the accessibility community has said often and said very loudly, is to start with accessibility in mind.
Mhm.
If you build your game from the very beginning with the idea that it's going to be as accessible as you can, it's a lot less expensive, and B, a lot simpler to build up from that as a platform. The minute you're trying to retrofit anything into a video game, it becomes really complicated and really expensive in terms of developer hours, right? Whether that's a hot bug fix or whatever, because when it comes out on publishing day, there's something that the community finds right away. Or whether it's accessibility options like key rebinding, for example, that if you haven't built key remapping into your game from the start, it's a lot harder to retrofit that than it would be to have just made it an option from the beginning.
Yeah. That's a really good, like, simple one. It's just key rebinding. And you've kind of made me realize just putting more things at the like player level in the settings menu, just kind of giving them as many options to tweak as possible is probably the most valuable way, because you don't know how people might use those settings, right?
And that's one of the things, like, there's obviously accessibility options aren't bad options, but ideally you don't package up a bunch of options and call them accessibility options. You just have all these options available in the relevant parts of your game settings menus, right? So nobody necessarily knows that isn't the person with the disability what is going to be accessible to somebody.
Yeah.
Is it that actually they need to reroute audio in a certain way to make that more accessible to them? Is it that they need to change the contrast or change the setting I saw in the new Far Cry 6 that you could actually put contrasting beacons around particular things so that you could see that there was actually an enemy standing there in a jungle, or that this item is available for being picked up, because it would have a little halo around it in a color that you could even choose which things were which color by their representation. Or is it like me, a game that I'm going to play, and for me the biggest thing is, can I rebind the keys? Can I not only use mouse and keyboard, but can I also use controller at the same time as mouse and keyboard? Which is why one of the reasons why you see me playing Apex all the time is because it is one of those games where I can use everything. I can use my mouse, my keyboard, and my Xbox controller to give myself even more options in terms of buttons.
Wow.
So there's no one sort of like, this is the thing you must do to be accessible, because everything is something that's going to make it more accessible the more options you give to people.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely go early and go to people that understand accessibility. Don't just sort of go, okay, I'm going to make it accessible and do a bunch of reading and not actually ask someone like myself to come in and have that conversation with you and the team to help make it accessible. Because that's again, that's one of those, like, don't try and problem solve things for disabled people without including disabled people in that.
Absolutely. And I feel like there's some similarities between conversations of like diversity and inclusivity. You know, you don't want to speak for someone else. You want to bring them into the conversation and 100%. Think about them from the very beginning. I was going to ask you, if someone had like an alpha or a beta of a game, like what would you recommend they do in order to put themselves on a path of better accessibility? You kind of answered it by saying to approach people like yourself, or I guess my question is, where else can people go to find people that are advocating for accessibility or have disabilities that they'd love to talk about? Is there like a place that you'd recommend?
Twitter is a huge space, obviously, for engaging with people on accessibility. There's obviously a big issue that you need to be willing to engage people for their expert opinions. And if you're a game developer, you need to be willing that if you're engaging someone for an expert opinion, whether that's an expert coding opinion or an accessibility opinion, that you've got some budget to compensate for that time. But then there's also fantastic organizations like Ablegamers, for one.
Mm-hmm.
They are fabulous in terms of they've got toolkits out there for helping make accessibility easier to understand and to challenge people with. And they've also got access to things that bigger game studios, more than smaller ones potentially, can access accessibility via their pool of disabled testers, you know.
Nice.
And I don't know, they have like player experience panels and stuff that companies can hire them for, essentially, is my understanding.
Nice.
But yeah, definitely either find out who is your local accessibility people via asking on Twitter. If you're not New Zealand based, there's people all over the world doing this. And you know, most of us know each other because it's a pretty small world out there. So if you ask the question, I'm sure somebody will point you in the right direction of, oh, so and so works in your region. Like, hit them up; they'll help.
Yeah.
Otherwise, also, one of the most amazing things I've been seeing lately in new game titles are obviously credits for accessibility credits. So check those out sometimes too and be like, hey, these people worked on this game. Maybe they can help with our game.
That's a really good point.
But also, yeah, just be a part of the conversation if that's something you're keen to do. And I also think indie devs, like my talk of big budgets and studios getting involved isn't to scare away indie devs. Like, indie devs, definitely reach out, talk to people. There's some great organizations, even here in New Zealand and Australia. We have Accessibility Unlocked, who have been at various NZGDC things, and even I think Melbourne Games Week, because some of their people are over there. Yeah, Accessibility Unlocked on Twitter at.
That's awesome. I mean, those are great resources already that anyone who is interested.
Access Unlock ANZ. There you go.
Okay,
that's
cool.
A little shout out to them. Great little team, both here in NZ and over in Australia.
Nice.
So they're the ANZ folk that'll help. And they're also about helping game devs, disabled game devs, to find work more accessible, not just to make gaming more accessible for the players.
Yeah. Oh wow, yeah. That's a whole other topic as well. I have a few more questions before we wrap up. One is I've noticed the ring on your on your finger. Can you talk about the significance of that and what does that mean?
Absolutely, it's actually my wedding ring.
Wow.
I've been married for coming up on 7 years in January.
Congratulations.
To a lovely lady who is always behind the scenes helping me do all the things I do.
It's another hack, I'm sure. Cable ties and having a wife.
Exactly. She gives me the freedom to do all this stuff and to engage in the community and be a part of it while she's off working hard.
Amazing. That's awesome to hear.
But also twofold. The ring, actually, I used to wear a thumb ring well before it was a wedding thumb ring, because that's actually helped keep my thumb separated and not scar up like the rest of my fingers did. And so I realized, I think probably when I was a bit of a dark and moody teenager, that wearing a ring helped keep my fingers separated.
Oh,
so
nice.
I've always worn one.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's that story.
That's great. One other question I had was, is there like a favorite moment that you can recall? It could be maybe a game related moment where you achieved something or you got something done that just kind of stuck in your mind. I mean, I'd love to know if there's any moment that's stuck in your mind that's just kind of made you feel like you've overcome the world, and it might be related to your disability, it might not be.
Well, when we're talking gaming, and I say this a lot when I get asked to do podcasts, but not to be a shill for Microsoft or anything, but my most amazing sort of accessibility moment was the first time I ever properly played a game on Xbox because of the adaptive controller that came out. and getting my first ever Xbox to play,
Mm.
and finally being able to use these things that. So as a youngster, I kind of had hands, right? I was born with hands that I just gradually lost the use of over a lifetime of microscopic damage, daily wear and tear kind of stuff. But in that, I actually never been able to use an Xbox. Like when the early Xboxes came out, their controllers were massive compared to the PlayStation
I remember.
controllers.
Yeah.
And like people with real hands used to struggle to wrap their mitts around those damn things, right? So even back when I had some fingers and could kind of use a PlayStation, the Xbox was always out of my comfort zone. So I had never played an Xbox.
Mm.
But then this adaptive controller came around, and then I got an Xbox, and I was like finally able to play Halo and like play these games on a console that had been off limits for years.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
pretty amazing to think also in that same genre. I was in San Jose in 2018 on my way to TwitchCon actually, and went into a Microsoft store. And for the first time, I saw an Xbox adaptive controller just sitting there in the store on the shelf next to the Elite controller, and realizing that being disabled was no longer a niche thing. It was finally a company was putting a product out there for me and people like me to be able to experience playing video games in the market, not having to 3D print our own solutions kind of thing.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. And I think there's no fear, we shouldn't feel like you're being a shill for Microsoft, because I think they have done an incredible job in the last decade. But every year I feel like they're just really innovating on what it means for accessible solutions and what they're doing for the community. So I think it's completely worth putting them on a pedestal there, because I think they are leading the way from a games perspective on making everyone feel included.
Absolutely agree. And like I mostly say that as a joke, but I just think that what they're doing, what I'm waiting for is for all the other companies to surprise me in the same way. Yeah. I think you asked earlier, what am I waiting for? That's what I'm waiting for. Yeah. For accessibility to be the universal standard, for every company to have their version of the adaptive controller, and for every video game to be accessible to that.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I love it. And one more kind of more just casual question that I had was, I love your dog. I think they're beautiful. I'd love to know a bit more about them, and if they play a part in helping you navigate your life at all.
He does. Hang on, I can even show you him. There he is.
Oh, that's live right now.
Right now.
Oh my gosh,
he gets his own
adorable.
camera in the setup.
Wow.
There he is. Oh, and my time is almost up on the video. Hang on a second.
That's all good. I see. Your battery's running low. That's all good. Well, we've pretty much done.
I can hide that for a quick second so it doesn't overtake everything. There we go. It's a lot less distracting now. There we go.
That is all good. We are wrapping up.
Whiskey the Husky is my assistant for the longest time. He's mostly retired now. But the reason I actually got a husky was because he used to pull my wheelchair like a sled dog. So he was trained to be an accessibility dog and pull the wheelchair, pick stuff up if I dropped it, which so long as it wasn't like, dropping a hot dog or something, I'd actually get it back. And he's just been with me ever since he was a puppy. He used to come to the office with me back when I worked in an office. He actually won like New Zealand's Stuff had this like top office dog competition every year, and I think they've been doing it still with whatnot. But he won like the first ever version of
That's
that,
amazing.
and he's actually almost more well known than I am. I'm actually a little bit
Jealous.
a little bit jealous. And for the longest time, it used to just upset me that he had way more Instagram followers than my accounts do.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. But what a cool companion to have though
He's
in your
so
life.
good. He's
Yeah.
very demanding and very talkative, and he has a massive ego, but he's such good value. And unfortunately, not as much of an accessibility dog these days. So I can't keep bringing him to conferences and stuff.
Oh no. Oh well, that's awesome to hear. And I'm really, yeah, I'm just really grateful that you've been so open and just sharing your lifestyle. For me, just during this call, I've learned so much and gained a deeper appreciation for the kind of struggles that you have, the kind of solutions that are out there as well, and the resources that are out there for people looking. You know, if I was to produce my own games one day, I would feel confident knowing where to go to find that support and that access to the community to really keep that conversation going from the beginning, like you said.
Absolutely. And super keen to talk to more people too, as well. If any of you out there listening are like, what is accessibility? Where do I start? Flick me a DM. We can talk. Honestly,
totally. You're very active on Twitter, so yeah, anyone that's interested,
too active sometimes.
we all are. Anyone that's on Twitter for long enough gets sucked into it. But if you can find Humphrey on Twitter at No Hands No Excuses, and then through that you can
minus
find
the S on Twitter, by the way. I hit the character limit. I didn't even know there was a character limit for your ads.
No Hands No Excuse.
Yeah.
Awesome.
They wouldn't let me have all the excuses, just one.
I love it. But on there you can find his Twitch, links to other links about him as well. And yeah, feel free to get in touch if you have any questions about accessibility.
Or if you just want to play Apex sometime.
Exactly, yeah, or just play Apex. I love it. Thank you so much for your time and yeah, just sharing your story and knowledge. I really appreciate it.
No worries, man. It's super awesome to chat.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Zero to Play podcast. I hope you learned something about game development, the games industry as a whole, or the future of games. You can follow us on Twitter at Zero to Play, subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Spotify, or any other podcasting service. Other than that, you can find links to this episode down in the description below, and I'll see you guys next week for the next episode.